Welcome to another episode of the Concrete Logic Podcast. And today I have Mike Hernandez, the technical director of the American Society of Concrete Contractors, ASCC, with me. And we're going to talk about a survey they did jointly with ACI about PLC, Portland Limestone Cement, one of our favorite topics on this show. We beat the crud out of that thing and it still needs to be beaten on. So Mike's going to help us with that today. Before we get started, as I always do every episode, the purpose of this podcast is for you all, the folks that are listening. But you can support the show in three different ways. The first way is share the podcast with someone you know. If you're listening to this, you know someone that probably doesn't listen to the podcast and would get some kind of value out of it. So please share it with them. The second thing you can do is if you go to the website, concretelogicpodcast.com, and there you can reach out to me a couple ways. There's a contact button on there, and then the bottom right-hand corner of the homepage, there's a little microphone thing. So you can either click the contact button, that'll shoot me an email, or you can click on the microphone, and it'll record like a voicemail, and it'll shoot a voicemail to my email. And what I'm looking for you to do there is to give me topic or guest ideas, because I really want to put out episodes that you all want to hear. So a majority of the folks, I would say between 90 to 95% of the people that are on this podcast is because someone suggested them or referred them to come on the show. So that it's up to you all to reach out and tell me who you want to hear or what topic you want to hear about. And then the last way is on the same homepage on concretelogicpodcast.com. There's a donation button at the top right-hand corner, and you click on that, and then you can pick. There's a couple choices there. You can either pick any amount that you want to donate to the show, or there's another one where you can do like a subscription, a monthly subscription. I think it's set at like $10 a month or something like that. But either one, if you feel like you want to give some value back in that way, you're more than welcome. And when you do that, what I do is the next episode after you donate to the show, I'll list you as a producer. So you'll be attached to that episode forever. Okay. So feel free to do that. And it also helps me when you do that, you do any of these three things, then I know you're listening and that I am, providing you value, because that's my goal. I want to provide you value on the podcast. So with that, let's get into it. Mike, did you want to tell us a little bit more about ASCC and what you all do for concrete contractors?
Sure. Seth, thanks for having me on today. For those who don't know, ASCC is a trade association for concrete contractors, about 700 members, about 600 of which are concrete contractors, and there's about 100 members who are either vendors who sell materials or ready-mix producers or engineers or consultants. They can be other associations also. So we're closely affiliated with a lot of the major national groups like ACI, NRMCA, PCA, pumping, tilt-up guys. So there's a lot of industry overlap within the concrete world, so kind of keep an eye on what each other are doing. And ASCC is very engaged at ACI to try and influence on behalf of concrete contractors the direction of the documents to make them more contractor friendly. So I'm actually personally involved on 15 ACI committees, and our members are involved in over 50 committees to just kind of keep an eye on things and have an influence. So what I want to talk about you today is that, as you mentioned, PLC is a very hot topic. It has come up multiple times at World of Concrete, at ASCC meetings, at ACI International like the San Francisco Convention, in the spring of 23, and the Boston Convention in the fall of 23, and by early 24, our members were clamoring for, what are we doing about this? What is ASCC going to do? And ACI 302 is the committee that works on slabs. And because that group was seeing the biggest challenges, in general, if you're pouring walls or if you're pouring foundations, the effect seemed to have been minimal or none at all. Maybe it takes a little longer to get strength. Maybe it doesn't matter much. But for hard troweled slabs, those are the guys who are seeing the biggest difference from a 1-2 to a 1L. And about half of respondents were saying that they were seeing no issues at all. So the guys who were having issues were asking, what are the other people who aren't having any problems at all doing differently that I'm doing? It becomes like, what am I doing wrong? What's different about my mix or my team? So I guess was the genesis of, okay, what are we going to try and what can we do to determine what is different? And so I'm not sure how many people regularly subscribe to Concrete International, but there was a article published in the February issue of CI, which went into the survey, and it went into plastic and hardened properties that were different based upon what the respondents had said, from a 1-2 or a 2-5, depending on where you're from, mix. So we went to the New Orleans Convention proposing that we do a major mix collection effort from across the country, all 8 NRMCA regions, and say, okay, the industry was stable pre-COVID. We'll use those mixes as a baseline, and then we'll want to collect 1,000 mixes, 50 of a 1-2 and 75 of a 1L from each of the 8 NRMCA regions, and then run them through an AI. And for the ones that contractors are saying are working well, try and find strong correlations and weak correlations for what has changed from that 1-2 mix to the 1L mix, to say, okay, if I was doing great with my 1-2 mix and I'm doing great with my 1L mix, what am I most likely to have seen change from that previous to the new one? To just give some direction for contractors, because, if you just say, I don't like it, that's not much direction to your ready mix producer.
Right.
You want to give them, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean to jump in here. So can we talk a little bit about or maybe you were getting to this, was the data you collected. As most folks know that listen to this in concrete, contractors know this, that concrete is very it's a local product, right? It's made with local products.
Yes.
I was flipping through the information you sent me on the mix collection data. Did the NRMCA regions, is that what, did you all segment the data that way? Or I guess, can you talk about a little bit about that? Because I'm in Virginia, you're in California. We deal with totally different materials, right?
Yes, correct. So I'm actually, Jim's in California. I'm in the Denver area. I'm in
Oh,
Rocky
okay.
Mountain.
You're a little bit
So,
closer. Well,
and
you're
our
definitely
headquarters
done.
in St. Louis. So, the you're absolutely correct in that we're dealing with a local material, but it's the NRMCA does make regional distinctions. So we're trying to collect the data by region to try and subdivide it a little more, because maybe, like, The cement will be a little more regional than local because, for example, there's a couple cement producers in Colorado that basically service states a little bit to the east, a little bit to the south and west of them, and we're just in the process. So the funding approval was given, and the committee approval was given in late March. So by April, I was basically generating a list of ASCC members and ACI 302 members of who would be appropriate to ask for this. So the ask kind of went out in late April, early May, and then a kind of a refresh. Okay, I don't have enough data yet. Ask more people in late June, and where I really need support from your listeners is in NRMCA regions 3 and 4, which is North Central and the Pacific Northwest, super underrepresented in Nebraska, the Dakotas, Minnesota, Iowa, Montana, Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. That there's just, for whatever reason, not very many ASCC members and not very many ACI participating contractors to ask even, and even fewer responding, because the ones that have responded have said, we're not using 1L in Oregon very much, or we're not using it in where I am in Montana. That is, for whatever reason, it's about 50, somewhere between 55 and 60% of the cement being used that was a 1-2 is now being used as a 1L.
Okay.
But I need help there.
So I might have jumped ahead, and I apologize, Mike. So the survey results that you sent me back was just asking what kind of problems are you seeing right now? That
Yeah.
you have results from, right? So that you have the results from that, and then the next step is what you're asking for folks to participate in is where you're collecting data from these different regions of the mixes that you're having problems with. Is that what you're looking for? Are you looking for data for which ones you're having success with and ones that you're having problems with?
Well, hoping to get more that we're having success with, but really I'll take anything at this point.
Okay.
If you're having problems, I will send a survey to them that says, okay, what are you seeing with this mix? Some of them are saying, okay, it's plastic property challenges, like it's a little water starved, or it's set times are all over the place, or I'm having hardened challenges, like it's getting low strains at 28 days, or it's cracking before I can saw cut it. I mean, but what we're really hoping to get more of is ones that are doing well, and then try and see what those mixes, what is unique about those mixes as opposed to the ones that are not doing as well.
Mm-hmm.
And use the AI to kind of crunch through those to get the correlations of what makes them special. Because it's a very messy problem, because like you said, they're unique materials. You're dealing with different proportionings, different targets for how much cement, the aggregate gradations, whether they're kind of gap graded, like there's no intermediate aggregates, there's manufactured versus natural sands, how much admixtures, what the water cement ratio is. Like there's so many variables. It's very difficult for a human to look at hundreds of mixes and distinguish what's important and what's not important. But the AI platform that we're working with, it's like, should be fine doing those kind of things.
So you're so what are other than the mix design, are you looking for
survey for performance feedback? That's why I want to talk to contractors, not just producers.
Right. But when you're talking to contractors, I know we're focusing on the material, but you're also looking for, how did they cure it? Thickness of slab. I assume we're focusing on slabs because you said that's where most of the problems are. So you need to know probably thickness of slabs as well. I would think.
I'm not asking about thickness. I am asking them for the weather conditions that they placed it with, if they can give it to me. Which will kind of give some indication of, the evaporation rate that they were dealing with. Like if it's, so traditionally 0.2 pounds per square foot per hour is like when you start worrying about, do I need to get evaporation reducers? Do I need to be misting the air, like the hot weather concreting threshold? That 0.2, people are talking about being down to like 0.1 or 0.05, like 1/4 of the evaporation rate is now a concern that you have to start putting countermeasures on it or doing things to make sure that it doesn't get away from you. And at first we were recommending just using more evaporation reducer. Now it's true finishing aids, which would be like not trying to endorse anything, but like a colloidal silica would be something that you could actually finish into the slab as opposed to the monomolecular, like old school confilm that you were just supposed to keep the moisture inside the slab, because it seems to be more sensitive to moisture loss than a 1-2 was. Which seemed 1-2 seemed to hold on to its own moisture better.
Yeah. No, I think from what I've heard and what I've, the stories I've heard, and folks that have been on the podcast, it sounds like the cement is not as forgiving as type 1-2, and so if you're used to get away with something in the past, you're not getting away with it now. At least that's what I believe is going on. So if you had crappy curing measures before, processes before, this mix is not going to let you get away with it. And it's like you said, I think the water, how the water, it seems like it's the issue is around how much water's in the mix from what I can tell from this point, at least the data that's been shared with me. But like around here, I haven't heard of, like in the Mid-Atlantic region and projects that we're associated with, I haven't heard a lot of problems in our area. But if you go further south of us, then you start hearing stories of people having problems. So that's why I was asking about how you're separating the regions and stuff, because some areas are not having as many problems as others. And again, like I like your idea of send us the successful mixes instead of everyone's so focused on, when things go bad.
Yeah. And I think you kind of nailed it when you said that 1-2 was more forgiving, that you can get away with a lot of things that you probably shouldn't have been getting away with, like just minimal or half-hearted curing, initial curing, which now you don't get away with that half-hearted effort. You have to do it properly to get the proper performance. And just getting the message to the finisher, so the guys with the tools, that you got to do it the right way. And then as that cement is being transitioned into new markets, then recognizing that, hey, what used to in cooler weather, now it's going to take more time to set up, and just being prepared for that. Or in hot weather, it might actually set faster, just to have if they're prepared for it, they can probably handle it. But if they're not prepared for it, if they're thinking it's going to be the same as it was 5 years ago, it's just not. It's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what was someone shared with me, I won't say who it is, but a precaster shared with me, you mentioned earlier that folks aren't having issues with the I don't want to say mass concrete because that's the wrong term to use, but the larger elements. So your columns, your walls, foundations and such haven't been an issue. But I think it's because those things typically, so you got the formwork that sits on them longer. So it's getting that initial curing like it needs. So if you leave the formwork on, that's essentially you're curing the concrete the way you're supposed to. But the precaster shared with me, he's like, they have to pull their slabs within 24 hours to keep their processes and their I forgot what the thing's called.
Turn their beds. Yeah.
Turn the beds. Thank you. Turn their beds quickly. He's like, we're just adding more cement. We're using more cement than we were using before. And he's like, how green is that?
Very.
Because they don't have a choice. They got to have that strength come up in a short amount of time. So they don't have the luxury of like the these 1L folks are telling us that, now you got to ask your client, the GC, the owner, say, hey, we're using 1L now. Are you good with us breaking at 56 days instead of 28 to get the strength that the design team wants? The precast guys don't have that luxury. They can't wait.
Yeah. I mean, then you start getting into like strength enhancing admixtures or trying to change proportioning to try and tweak the mix a little bit. So it does present a whole new world. And I guess I'm not as much on the precast side, but I was at the precast conference in Denver in February, and they definitely brought up that they're sensitive to turning the beds every day that they get feed out there. Whatever they got to do to make that happen, heat the forms, whatever's happening to make it work.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more when so the survey that initiated this this next effort that y'all are making, the survey that you sent out, and you're essentially asking what problems you're having. Can you talk a little bit about that survey, the results of it, and what spurred this additional effort?
Sure. So it was a survey that was sent out by the ASCC and ACI 302 committee. There was 173 respondents. And there had already been a couple of surveys. There had already been one by ASCC that was sent out in the fall of 22. There was one sent out by the Tennessee Concrete Association in the summer of 23. The NRMCA also had one kind of right on the heels of that in 23. So this one kind of opened in the late summer of 23 and closed in October of 23. And it was actually one of the better responded to surveys that ACI had done. And it had a good cross section of respondents from ready-mix cement, admixtures, concrete contractors. I think the biggest actual group was ready-mix producers. And one of the most striking things was that almost 80% of respondents said there was increased water demand. Almost over half said the set times had increased, and 20% said the set times had decreased. So there's a lot of variability in set time reporting. 40% said there was less bleed water. About 30% said they're seeing crusting. Changes in finishing, almost half respondents. More evaporation reducers, about 40%. Those are all plastic property changes. Hardened property changes, about half said there was no changes. Like a third said they were seeing random cracking, less wear resistance. About 20% said more dusting. So a little bit of everything. Some delamination issues. So this keeps coming back to, in every one of these surveys, at least half the respondents said there was no change. And that's kind of what triggered this, like, why are some people having all these problems? And why are over half people saying there's nothing to see here? Like, what are they doing right? Which triggered this next phase, which is, well, let's try and figure out what they're doing right. What are they doing differently?
Yeah. Did you have anybody come back? I'm flipping through the survey. So if I'm overlooking it, I'm sorry. As far as finish, something I heard recently was, it looks like it's porous on top. Like it's got little tiny holes you can see. Do you have anybody come back and say that?
So what we're typically targeting people to respond on is like a hard troweled slab. So it would, if you're hard troweling a slab, it would be very unusual to have pores open up like that. I guess that would be particularly troublesome.
Yeah.
Wear resistance has been something that's come up. Like the little commercial robots that take the same path all day, every day on a floor will wear like railroad tracks on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been a fair number of people who've had to do some repairs. So it seems like there's been more intermediate aggregates introduced into mixes than previously existed. There's been viscosity modifiers being thrown in to make the mix more creamy by some teams. Like there's kind of a little bit of everything is some of the solutions I've heard. So that's why this whole AI thing has been like, okay, what's the most likely thing to have happened versus just having 20 ideas and then trying to hit all 20 of them to get the thing at the top of the list that's the most likely to help you, and leave at the bottom of the list the thing that's least likely to have been a correlation to a mix performing well, just to prioritize transitions. So right now we just need a whole lot of mixes to be submitted still. So I would ask that your listeners, if they haven't already received a request for, so right now I initially reached out to about 200 contractors, and I just went last week and kind of reanalyzed our lists and tried to, at some point I had put some bumpers on the maximum number of participants, like per state or per region. Like we have a lot of people in California and Texas because they're such populated states. I mean, two biggest populations in the country. So, and New York was number 3. So I just said, okay, so we're getting a lot of Texans. Fine. So I just increase the numbers of allowable invites to any given state. And so I'm pushing the invite out to like 300 contractors. And I mean, within ASCC, there's pretty much a whole lot of representation among the biggest, but then also there's a whole lot of contractors that I wouldn't necessarily meet that do plenty of work that just, don't engage ASCC. So I would love to hear from them. The email I'm trying to collect these it's mixes, MIXES at ASCConline.org. And if you just ping me on that email, it's just set up just for this study, and I can send them more data and I can about the study itself, or just send me, basically it's a submittal package is what I'm asking for. Because the submittal package will have your proportioning, it should have strength data, it'll have a mill cert, it'll have the admixtures, it'll have the certification for the aggregates, and And that should be enough of what the AI needs to do an analysis.
Okay, can you say that email again? It was mixes at
ASCC online.org.
Okay.
And if we could put that in the notes for the podcast, that'd be great too.
Yeah, I'll do that.
So, I mean, I've been told there's 30,000 concrete contractors in the U.S. and only 600 of them are ASCC members. So there's a whole lot of people that aren't members.
Right. So we're looking for mixes, slab mixes that were successful.
Yes, slab mixes specifically. I mean, if you have an exterior, like a pavement mix, I guess I wouldn't throw it away, but I mean, I'm really looking for interior, non-air entrained, 3,000 to 5,000 PSI mixes that intended to be hard troweled or troweled as opposed to like a broom finish. Because if you're broom finishing, it tends to be a little more forgiving because you're not going to give it that final pass.
And you said you were lacking mostly, is it north central region?
North Central, Nebraska, Dakotas, Minnesota, Iowa, and Pacific Northwest, Montana, Oregon, Idaho, Washington. We have decent representation, a lot of other places. But I mean, I'll take anything I can get, really. I'd be happy to have, especially if it's a good mix.
Yeah, I mean, do you plan on, are you going to release it once you have all the data for all the regions, or do you think you might phase it out? Because it sounds like you're getting a lot of data from California, Texas, and New York area. I mean, would you release that prior to give people an idea of what y'all are seeing?
I'm not there yet. So right now, I'm just in the raw collection phase, and we're basically the phasing is just get a bunch of the data, and then Geotech, Roxy is the name of their platform. They're going to crunch the data, and then we have the chairs of the proportioning committee and the admixture committee have agreed to take a look at it to make sure that the AI didn't come up with some crazy answer that doesn't make any sense, to validate the conclusions, and then basically just have a summary report written by probably one of the consultants on 302 committee just to say, okay, here's what we're seeing. But I still need a lot more mixes that are doing well. Basically, I'll bounce someone a survey once they give me a mix to say, okay, how's this mix doing? What kind of conditions was it placed in? If it was ideal conditions that it did well, is maybe not super surprising. If it was kind of challenging conditions, that would be like really good to know.
Yeah. Well, good. Did we cover everything that you wanted to talk about today?
Yeah, I mean, that was the big thing that's in process. Just the low carbon concrete in general is a super hot topic these days. If you've been to an ACI convention, there's multiple sessions about low carbon concrete, and just that there's an international and national push and federal funding to try and get essentially less clinker in our concrete. And that comes with its own challenges. And unfortunately, the contractor could be the one left with the responsibility for the bad outcome if they're not focused on, am I doing enough preparation and we're doing testing to see if this is a placeable mix. Like if you get first time ever out of the box, like you may have an issue. I mean, we're recommending that people basically do a mock-up if it's a project that a mixer are familiar with in a new area. Basically if you can get a bleed test, that'd be great, ideal. if you know the set time, that would be ideal. If it's setting up in 2 hours, the test has a 5-hour set time. Something is happening here that you're not, could be crusting on you and you're not realizing it. So, just things to be aware of. And it's a major focus for ASCC. I could see us work on this for quite a while, actually.
Yeah, I was. So you haven't released a formal position statement yet for that? Right.
Well, we did some alerts
Alerts,
that were.
right?
You did have to be a member to get to those that are.
Yeah, I knew I saw something. I was on your website. I was like,
login. So
I was like, there. We're still at position statement 47. So,
oh, by the way, the position statements I did go through the last few months, and some of the position statements have been written over the course of 20 years, so they're referencing older ACI documents. So I basically went through, and if it was referencing 318 from like 2005, I pulled it up to the current 318.19, and if it was a reference to like chapter 8, which is now chapter 26, to get the current references, current years, current chapters, if the quote's different, to fix that. We updated all the references, and then we're having translate into Spanish. So by the end of July or sometime in August, we should have all 47 position statements with the most current ACI documents and in Spanish. There's one, which is number 6, that was endorsed by like 7 other trade associations, so I didn't touch it because that was a big lift. That was like 2021 to get them to all endorse that. So that's the one. While the flooring associations, that's not changing the word on that one. So
yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, that one we've discussed on here. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on there. So I will make sure I put this email address to send the mix designs to, and you'll have Mike's contact information as well, and the link to ASCC. Again, I can't recommend highly enough the position statements, and now it's open to the public, so you can go on their website and see it without being a member. That's awesome. I think we could all. I was sharing with Mike. I used one just a few weeks ago with the client. I don't know if they read it, but I gave it to them, so I could say I did it.
Nice.
But Mike, I appreciate you coming on the show today. Again, I'll give all Mike's contact information, and then again, please help Mike out with these mixes. Send over your information to the folks that have been successful with the new PLC mixes. And until next time, let's keep it concrete.